Perhaps you know this feeling well. You wake up on a Saturday morning, sunlight brushing gently across your face. The air is calm, the house is still. Then the phone vibrates. A friend wants to meet. A neighbor knocks at the door. A family member insists you should come out, spend time, be social. On the surface, it sounds simple, harmless even, but somewhere deep inside, there is a heaviness, an unspoken resistance, a quiet whisper that says, "Not today." And immediately after that whisper, the shame creeps in, the self-questioning. You wonder if you're becoming cold, distant, maybe even broken. After all, aren't we supposed to want connection? Aren't we supposed to smile, welcome people in, make time, be available? Especially as women, we've been told since childhood that our worth is measured in how much we can give of ourselves to others, that our role is to nurture, to be the safe harbor for everyone else. And yet, here you are feeling the pull away from all that. I want you to know something important, something you may not have been told before. This feeling you carry, this need to step away, is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is not always a symptom of trauma. It is not necessarily anxiety. It is not weakness. Sometimes it is something far deeper, far older, far more sacred. It can be soul fatigue, the exhaustion of carrying too many energies that are not yours. It can be archetypal overload, living too long in the roles others have assigned to you until you can no longer hear your own voice beneath the noise. It can be energetic incoherence, the body's way of telling you that your inner rhythm no longer matches the environment you're in. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that part of becoming who you truly are, what he called individuation, requires withdrawing from the collective noise. Not because you are broken, but because you are dissolving the ego structures that no longer serve you. Withdrawal for Jung was not regression. It was a sacred stage in which the masks begin to fall, the false identities loosen their grip, and the soul gathers its strength for what comes next. He compared it to the journey inward, away from the crowd, into the forest of the self, where the real transformation can begin. Think of the caterpillar. From the outside, when it enters the cocoon, it appears still, perhaps even lifeless. But inside, every cell is changing. The old form is dissolving completely so that something entirely new can emerge. If you interrupted that process, if you forced the cocoon open too soon, you would not save the creature. You would destroy it. This is what sacred solitude is. It is not laziness. It is not rejection of life. It is the necessary stillness before flight. Modern neuroscience affirms what ancient wisdom has always known. Joe Dispenza teaches that the constant stimulation of social environments locks our brains into high-frequency beta waves, the state of alertness, reaction, and surface-level engagement. We are switched on but disconnected from the deeper layers of our own being. Solitude shifts us into alpha and then into theta, the brainwave states of creativity, emotional coherence, and spiritual attunement. In these slower, deeper rhythms, the nervous system repairs itself. The heart begins to speak again. And yet, our culture mistrusts solitude. We glorify extroversion. We celebrate constant availability. We treat being well-connected as a badge of honor, even when those connections drain us, even when they keep us from hearing our own inner truth. We tell ourselves we are being social, when in truth, we are often bypassing ourselves. We are escaping the discomfort of our own company. But here is the shift I want you to hold in your heart. Your solitude is not a problem to solve. It is a portal. It is not closing you off from life. It is preparing you for it. It is the space where the false falls away and the real emerges. The question is not, how do I stop being this way? But rather, what is my soul trying to tell me through this? As we step into this journey together, I invite you to put down the idea that you are failing at life because you don't always want to be around people. I invite you to consider the possibility that your withdrawal is a form of sacred listening. A listening so deep, so essential, that the outer world will never understand it until it has lived it too. Because in that silence, in that stillness, in that choice to be with yourself, you are not disappearing. You are becoming. The journey we began in the cocoon of solitude now moves into the terrain of something often misunderstood, the invisible, almost imperceptible weight of being too exposed to the energy of others. This is not always about noise in the literal sense. It is about the flood of impressions, emotions, and unspoken demands that pour into you when you enter a room. Sometimes you feel it even before you arrive. You anticipate the swirl of conversations, the subtle tensions, the unvoiced expectations. And your body, wise in ways the mind often dismisses, begins to prepare its escape long before you have given yourself permission to leave. For some, this reaction feels like being too sensitive, but sensitivity is not fragility. Neurobiology reveals that what we call sensitivity is often a heightened capacity for processing multiple streams of information at once. Mirror neurons, designed to help us empathize, light up constantly in crowded spaces. Dopamine levels spike in response to stimuli, and the nervous system scrambles to make sense of so many signals. This is why at times you feel like your mind is splintering, trying to track not only the words being spoken, but the emotions behind them, the shifts in tone, the subtle glances. You are carrying far more than your share of the room's emotional temperature. Carl Jung would recognize this as the psychic burden of unintegrated shadow material, not just your own, but everyone's. Every social interaction is, in truth, a silent exchange of projections. We meet not only the person, but also the image they have constructed of us, the story they carry about themselves, and the unconscious wounds they do not yet see. If you leave such encounters feeling heavy or strangely restless, it is often because your psyche has been navigating these invisible crosscurrents. Jung did not view this fatigue as avoidance, but as a form of psychic self-preservation, a way to protect your inner clarity from being clouded by what is not yours. And yet the world tells another story, that not liking to be around people means you are broken, antisocial, perhaps even selfish. We are handed the myth of the broken introvert, a caricature that has little to do with reality. The truth is more paradoxical. Often the women who need the most solitude are the ones with the deepest capacity for connection. They are the ones who do not wish to dilute the sacredness of relating by scattering it into every passing interaction. In the body, however, another battle is taking place. The amygdala, the brain's sentinel, constantly scans for safety. In environments that feel inauthentic, it will subtly activate survival patterns, a tightening in the throat, a holding of the breath, a readiness to flee. Even if the situation is not overtly dangerous, the nervous system reads false connection as a kind of emotional threat. And so you begin to feel the pull, not just toward the door, but toward yourself. This is where the metaphor of the soul allergic to noise finds its truth. It is not the sound itself that overwhelms, but the chaos beneath it, the unspoken, the unresolved, the unaligned. Just as someone with a sensitivity to sound may hear frequencies others cannot, you feel the incoherence in spaces others find comfortable. It is not weakness. It is a form of sacred intelligence, a gift the world often misinterprets. Your withdrawal, then, is not merely about escaping noise. It is about honoring the body's subtle wisdom, about trusting the truth of what it senses, long before the mind can rationalize it. In this light, the need to retreat is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of a truer, more coherent one. And this brings us to a deeper mystery, that perhaps the very reason you step away from people has less to do with avoidance and more to do with an archetypal call that has been echoing through your soul for years. A call to step not into the crowd, but into the ancient inner path of the hermit. That is where our journey leads next. What we often mistake for simple social discomfort is, in truth, the quiet emergence of an ancient inner figure. Beneath the surface, behind every instinct to step back from the crowd, there is an archetype whispering its name, the hermit. In Jungian psychology, the hermit is not the image of a lonely wanderer. It is the keeper of the inner flame, the one who steps away not to escape life, but to illuminate it from a place beyond the noise. The hermit knows that certain truths are only revealed in stillness, and that wisdom ripens in the soil of solitude. Deep introversion, then, is not a flaw in the structure of your personality. It is an initiation, a rite that asks you to turn inward, to retrieve parts of yourself that have been scattered by the demands of the world. This withdrawal is not regression, but return. It is the soul recalling you to its original frequency, one that often carries echoes of ancestral memory. You may find, if you look closely, that your solitude has always been a kind of homecoming. For many, this inner call is bound to something even older, the soul contract of the mystic. Those who withdraw deeply often carry within them the blueprint of the oracle, the watcher, the restorer of inner order. These are not roles we invent in modern times. They are archetypes that have existed for as long as humans have sought meaning beyond survival. The mystic does not thrive in the marketplace of constant interaction. Her work is done in the spaces between, where silence becomes language and the unseen becomes visible. But here lies a paradox. When we force ourselves into social spaces that do not match our internal state, something subtle but powerful begins to erode our inner coherence. Pretending to enjoy connection creates a kind of static in the field, a mismatch between what we feel and what we project. This static dilutes our magnetism, making it harder for the right people, the right opportunities, the right conversations to find us. It's not that you are incapable of connecting, it's that every moment of false connection pulls you further from the truth that makes real connection possible. Over time, the cost of performing normal becomes heavy. The body begins to protest in ways the mind cannot ignore. A tightness in the throat when you're about to speak something untrue. A shallowness in the breath when you're holding back your real feelings. A fatigue in the eyes after hours of smiling without joy. These are not random discomforts. They are the body's way of telling you that the mask has grown too tight, that the price of conformity is no longer worth paying. And so some women discover the quiet art of what could be called the conscious exit. This is not about storming out or burning bridges. It is about leaving before your spirit has to. It is about honoring the moment you feel your energy begin to scatter and choosing to step away while you can still leave with grace. This is not rudeness. It is the preservation of your intuitive field. It is an act of deep self-respect. When we begin to see our withdrawal through this lens, not as failure but as fidelity to something ancient and sacred, the shame begins to dissolve. We recognize that stepping back is sometimes the most truthful way of stepping forward. And yet, the world around us does not make this path easy. It tempts us with the illusion of belonging, with quick fixes for loneliness that have little to do with true connection. This is where our exploration turns next, into the domain of the brain itself, and how it can be tricked into mistaking stimulation for belonging. To understand why solitude feels necessary, we must also understand how false connection can entrap us. That is the landscape of our next chapter. Connection is a word we have learned to use loosely, but beneath it lies a complex web of biology, memory, and longing. We often speak of belonging as though it were purely emotional, yet the brain, with its intricate chemistry, plays a decisive role in how we pursue it, and in how we mistake imitation for the real thing. One of the most subtle traps we face is the way dopamine, the brain's messenger of reward, can make shallow stimulation feel momentarily satisfying while leaving the deeper hunger for genuine connection unmet. In the digital age, it is easy to chase connection not to nurture ourselves, but to numb the disconnection we quietly carry. A glance at a glowing screen, a stream of updates, a short exchange with strangers online. Each one delivers a tiny surge of dopamine, and for a moment the ache softens, but this is not depth, it is distraction. Over time, the nervous system begins to crave the quick spike over the slow unfolding, making it harder to remain in the quiet spaces where true connection is born. The cost is more than emotional. When we force ourselves into environments, whether online or in person, just to fit in, we often draw relationships to us that are in resonance with our mask rather than our essence. This is one of the quiet ways we sabotage our own authenticity. We may think we are opening doors to new bonds, but in truth we are stepping into rooms that do not align with our true frequency. And so, instead of feeling seen, we feel even more invisible. For many women, this paradox is most acute in groups. They walk into a room and feel the air shift, unspoken competition, the subtle weight of comparison, the pull to join conversations that skim the surface but never touch the truth. The result is a peculiar loneliness, one that feels sharper than the solitude they left at home. In solitude, their thoughts are their own. In the group, their energy is dispersed, tethered to dynamics that do not nourish them. There comes a moment when peace begins to outweigh guilt. I think of a woman who, for years, attended weekly family dinners out of a sense of duty. Each evening left her drained, her inner voice quieter, her breath shallow. One day, she simply didn't go. And nothing collapsed. In fact, she began to notice her body relaxing, her mood stabilizing, her mind growing clearer. She wasn't abandoning her family. She was reclaiming her right to meet them from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. This reclamation of self begins in the nervous system, which operates in distinct brainwave states. When people-pleasing dominates, the mind is in high beta, alert, vigilant, often tense. With centered listening, it drops to alpha, a state of presence where words and emotions are processed more fluidly. And in the rare moments of deep coherence, it enters theta, the same rhythm we touch in meditation or moments of profound stillness. It is in theta that we align most naturally with our essence. Solitude, far from being a sign of avoidance, is often the only environment where these deeper brainwave states can stabilize. In the quiet, the mind is no longer chasing the next dopamine hit. It begins to settle. It begins to hear. And in that hearing, the truth becomes undeniable. Belonging cannot be measured by the number of people around you, but by the depth of coherence within you. And yet, to protect this coherence, something deeper must happen, a reweaving of safety into the very fabric of the nervous system. This is where our next chapter leads, into the tender space where solitude begins not only to soothe, but to rebuild the body's trust in itself. Safety is not simply the absence of threat. For the body, safety is a rhythm, a gentle coherence between breath, heart, and mind. And when life has kept you in a constant state of social vigilance, smiling when you don't mean it, absorbing energies you didn't invite, holding your shoulders just a little too high in public spaces, the nervous system forgets what that rhythm feels like. It forgets the softness it once knew. Solitude, in its truest form, is a medicine for the vagus nerve, the great communicator between your body and your brain. When you're alone and free from performance, your parasympathetic system takes the lead, the state of rest and digest. Your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens. Muscles unclench without you asking them to. This is not laziness or withdrawal, it is repair. Without this repair, the body remains caught in a loop of subtle fight or flight, even in environments that seem safe on the surface. This stillness does more than calm you, it amplifies your magnetic field. Joe Dispenza speaks of coherence as the moment when heart and brain are in harmony, creating a signal so clear that the quantum field responds. In solitude, with no external noise to fragment your focus, that signal strengthens. It is why you often find that the right person, the right opportunity, or the right insight appears only after a period of deep withdrawal. It is not coincidence, it is physics meeting spirit. A crucial part of this recalibration is what I call the sacred social detox. Not a rejection of the world, but a planned return to yourself. Imagine creating silence windows in your week, deliberate spaces where no one else's voice, face, or mood interrupts your inner alignment. These moments do not isolate you, they attune you. They teach your system what it feels like to be whole, so that when you do step back into the collective, you can sense instantly whether a space nourishes you or fractures you. And this is essential because healing, while it can be relational, is not always collective. There is a myth that transformation happens only in the presence of others, in shared vulnerability, in community healing circles, in the mirroring of connection. While these have their place, the deepest rewiring often happens in the womb of solitude, where no one else's energy is influencing your process. Here your body learns to trust its own signals again, without having to negotiate them through someone else's needs. One way to honor this is through what I call a frequency audit. Quietly ask yourself, which spaces allow my body to exhale and which ones tighten my chest? Which people leave me feeling luminous and which leave me feeling dim? If you were to draw a scale, on one end, nourishment, on the other, depletion, where would your daily interactions fall? This scale is not about judgment, it is about truth-telling. As you deepen this awareness, solitude becomes less about hiding and more about curating. It stops being a retreat from the world and becomes a conscious alignment with the environments that sustain your nervous system's harmony. And it is in this harmony that you begin to sense the subtle but profound difference between isolation that wounds and solitude that heals. Which brings us to the final threshold in this journey, the sacred edge between isolation and individuation, where solitude becomes not a prison, but a bridge to your truest self. There is a fine, almost invisible thread between solitude that transforms and isolation that erodes. One nourishes the soul, the other slowly starves it. And the difference is not always clear when you are deep within the experience. At first, both can feel the same, quiet, distant, unbothered. But over time, the quality of the silence changes. In conscious solitude, silence feels expansive, like a deep breath that opens the chest. In unconscious isolation, it begins to feel heavy, as though the air in the room has thickened and the walls are moving in. Jung warned that individuation without integration can become a prison of the self. The hermit, in his shadow form, retreats so far into his inner world that he forgets the bridge back to humanity. And for women who have been wounded in relationships, the temptation to close that bridge can feel like safety. It is not weakness. It is an instinct of self-preservation. But if left unexamined, it hardens into a form of exile. This is where the shadow of the hermit emerges, when silence is no longer a choice, but a hiding place. Sometimes, beneath the mask of the independent woman, there is unspoken grief, the grief of love betrayed, the grief of giving more than was ever received, the grief of realizing that the world may never truly see you in the fullness of your depth. And so the silence becomes both sanctuary and shield. But discomfort with people does not only reflect the flaws of others, it is also a mirror, showing the parts of ourselves still waiting to be met. Every face avoided, every conversation cut short, every gathering skipped. Each contains a fragment of our own psyche, a symbol of something unintegrated. Your triggers are not random. They are archetypes knocking gently, sometimes urgently, asking to be acknowledged. The path forward is not to swing to the opposite extreme, forcing yourself into spaces that drain you, but to practice what I call the compassionate return. This is not a leap, but a step. Small, intentional re-entries into safe connection. It could be holding eye contact with someone you trust until you feel the warmth of presence return to your body, or sharing one true thing about how you feel in a space where you know it will not be judged. These are micro-bridges, laid plank by plank, between your inner sanctuary and the collective field. And here lies the most important image of all, the bridge between worlds. Solitude and society are not opposing shores to be chosen between. They are two essential banks of the same river. Individuation is not about living entirely on one side. It is about learning to walk the bridge with grace. Sometimes you will linger longer in your inner world. Sometimes you will stand in the collective. But you know the path between them, and it is steady beneath your feet. It is here in this balance that solitude becomes not a withdrawal, but a renewal. Not an escape, but a conscious alignment. And as we step into the final reflection, we begin to see solitude for what it truly is. Not a flaw, but a signal guiding us toward our most coherent, luminous self. If we follow the thread of everything we have explored, it leads us here, to the quiet truth that your need for distance from people is not a defect, but a deep form of intelligence. This is not the kind of intelligence that wins debates or solves equations. It is soul intelligence, the silent knowing that your inner world must be honored if you are to remain whole. Perhaps this is why the old ways of pushing yourself into social obligations feel heavier now. You are no longer willing to abandon yourself for the comfort of others. You sense that there is a deeper story beneath your withdrawal, a story not of weakness, but of becoming. Carl Jung understood this well. Withdrawal is not regression, it is transformation in progress. It is the dismantling of old masks and the slow shaping of a self that no longer bends to fit. Joe Dispenza speaks of coherence, of the alignment between heart and brain that sends a clear signal into the field of life. This alignment does not happen in chaos. It happens in stillness. It happens when you stop scattering your energy into spaces that cannot receive it and begin to gather it back into your own center. When you do, your field does not fade into invisibility. It becomes magnetic, not because you are louder, but because you are true. Think of your solitude as a tuning fork. Every moment you spend in honest stillness, you are striking that fork and letting it vibrate through every cell of your being. You are calibrating yourself back to your purest frequency. And when that resonance is steady, the people and places that match it will begin to appear. Not all at once, not in a flood, but in the quiet, perfect timing of a life that is no longer desperate to be filled. So do not rush back into the noise. Let the silence speak. Let it show you the contours of the self you are becoming. Your solitude is not a wall to keep life out. It is a sacred chamber where your essence is being refined. And when you emerge, you will not return as you were. You will return as a woman who knows the value of her own presence and who will never again give it away carelessly. And maybe, just maybe, you will see that what you once thought was loneliness was the beginning of belonging to yourself.